Nice launch check and countdown net. Pad is clear.
10, 9, 8.
Launch auto sequence
7,
has started.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go for launch.
Vehicle is supersonic.
Stage separation confirmed. Dragon, separation confirmed. Stage 1 is transonic. Landing legs have deployed. And Falcon 9 has landed.
Good morning. You're looking at a live view of Falcon Heavy on historic launch pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center, awaiting liftoff at 9:41 a.m. Eastern Time. Welcome to our live webcast of the USSF-44 mission from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. My name is Kate Tice, and I'm the Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. And I'm excited to be here with you this morning, bringing you coverage of our first Falcon Heavy launch since 2019. Today's mission is a national security space launch for the United States Space Force and marks our 4th Falcon Heavy mission of all time and our 50th overall launch of 2022. When we first flew Falcon Heavy over 4 years ago, we sent Starman on a journey to space in a Tesla Roadster. After that demonstration mission in 2018, we launched 2 operational missions the following year with the Arabsat 6A and STP-2 payloads. Today's mission will be SpaceX's 3rd overall operational Falcon Heavy mission and our 2nd launching a U.S. government satellite, first being STP-2. USSF-44 will launch into a geosynchronous Earth orbit from Launch Complex 39A in Florida, which, as you can kind of see there through the fog on your screen. At our customer's request, we will not be showing views of the payload, so we'll be ending our webcast just after our Falcon 9 side boosters make their way back to land on LZ-1 and LZ-2, a little past the T+8 minute mark into flight. Now, as I mentioned before, it is a little foggy there at pad 39A. However, we promise that everything is still go for liftoff on time. The range and everything is still looking green. Everything's still looking good with our countdown as we approach the T-13 minute mark. We have a 90% chance, 90% favorability in terms of our weather conditions. So even though it is a little foggy, we're still good to go. Now, if for some reason we don't get to launch today, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at 9:37 a.m. Eastern Time. So we're now just under T-13 minutes and counting. Let's take a closer look at the Falcon Heavy vehicle that will deliver the USSF-44 payload to its intended orbit. Falcon Heavy is essentially 3 Falcon 9 rockets strapped together, meaning it can carry much larger payloads not only to Earth orbit, but to the Moon and Mars as well. Like the Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy is a 2-stage launch vehicle. The big difference is that the Falcon Heavy first stage is comprised of 3 cores, and Falcon 9 only has 1. Falcon Heavy has 28 engines, making it the world's most powerful
internal power.
Their call out indicating that the spacecraft is now on internal power. So with the 28 engines, this makes Falcon Heavy the world's most powerful operational rocket by a factor of 2. Each of these cores has 9 M1D engines, making for a total of 27 engines across all 3 boosters, as you see there in that shot. The 28th engine is a Merlin vacuum engine on the 2nd stage, and that's what will power the payload to its final targeted orbit. Altogether, the Merlin 1D engines at the base of Falcon Heavy produce 5 million pounds of thrust, equal to 18 747s at takeoff. In fact, the engines produce so much power that we don't even run them at full thrust all at once. We do that after liftoff. Now, after liftoff, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, those 2 side boosters will separate from the center core and come back to Earth for simultaneous landings at Landing Zone 1 and Landing Zone 2, which we have a beautiful view there on your screen. If successfully recovered, the side boosters will be refurbished and used in a future national security space launch. Upon side booster separation, the center core will keep firing for about 90 seconds before shutting down its engines, then perform a standard stage separation from the 2nd stage. We will not be attempting to land our center core today as the mission requires more performance, meaning in order to get our payload where it needs to go for today's mission, the center core will burn the fuel that we would typically use for recovery. For those of you looking closely, even though it is a little foggy, that's why you don't see any landing legs or grid fins on the center core. We'll probably get a better view of that after liftoff. Now moving up to the second stage, once the first stage and second stage separate, it will propel our payload to its intended orbit. At our customer's request, we will not be showing views of stage 2, so immediately after the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage fires up, we'll be directing all of our attention to the landing of our side boosters. Now, above the second stage is where our payload is safely enclosed inside the fairing. The fairing protects the payload from aerothermal loads, heating, and contamination during ascent. Once we reach the vacuum of space, we will jettison the fairing as the second stage continues its journey to orbit. We will be attempting to recover the fairing halves today with our recovery vessel, Doug. As I mentioned earlier, today's launch is USSF-44, and that's for the National Security, it's a National Security Space Launch mission for the United States Space Force. Now let's learn a little bit more from our customer about the mission at hand.
We depend on space every day to support our way of life, our supply chain, financial systems, weather tracking, and power grids, as well as air, land, and maritime infrastructure. Our U.S. military is the strongest and best equipped force in the world. In the heavily contested space domain, Space Systems Command leads a team of roughly 15,000 guardians, airmen, civilians, and contractors. Headquartered in El Segundo, California, our unbeatable team operates from multiple locations across the U.S. and includes 2 space launch deltas, SLD-45 at Patrick Space Force Base and SLD-30 at Vandenberg Space Force Base. Through unity of effort across the space acquisition enterprise, Space Systems Command delivers to warfighters integrated and resilient space capabilities through 5 program executive offices. Assured access to space, procures launch services and delivers on-orbit capabilities faster and more frequently than ever before, while sustaining ranges for the United States Space Force and commercial partners. Battle Management Command, Control, and Communication delivers tactical and operational command and control capabilities to warfighters, facilitating timely and quality battle space decisions for the joint all-domain fight. Space domain awareness and combat power maximizes the full characterization of space using a wide range of multi-domain assets by rapidly detecting potential and real threats to our nation and allies, which enables decisive action in the space domain. Communications and positioning, navigation, and timing ensures the delivery of resilient capabilities across the acquisition lifecycle, from prototypes to systems on the production line to systems our warfighters have been operating for years. Space sensing delivers space-based battle space awareness through missile warning, tracking, environmental monitoring, and tactical intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Our adversaries fully intend to disrupt, degrade, and destroy the U.S. and our allies' ability to access and operate in space. Not on our watch. Space Systems Command is focused on creating and sustaining resilient lethality in space through systems integration, unity of effort, and digital engineering ecosystems. At Space Systems Command, space starts here.
We're now at almost T-minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds, and the SpaceX team continues to count down for launch of our third operational Falcon Heavy flight, and all systems remain go. At this point in time, fuel load is complete on the second stage as well as one of the side boosters. And there we just heard the call out that the fuel load is now complete on the other side booster as well as the center core. Now, following a successful static fire last Thursday, Falcon Heavy rolled out to the pad with a payload yesterday and went vertical about 6 hours later. You can see a time lapse of that there on your screen. Before we began the webcast today, the SpaceX launch director pulled the members of the launch team and got a go for prop loading and launch, which, as I just mentioned, we're currently undergoing. We're loading propellant on all three first stage boosters and the second stage. You may be able to hear the live rocket sounds from our launch pad. The pops and hissings that you hear are from the propellant loading, as well as the launch mount and strong back that the propellant is flowing through. Falcon Heavy uses two propellants, a refined form of kerosene called RP1, or Rocket Propellant 1, and that's the fuel, and LOX, or liquid oxygen, for the oxidizer. An oxidizer is a type of chemical that a fuel requires in order to burn. The liquid oxygen is chilled below its boiling point so that it has a much greater amount of mass per volume. Basically, we can load more of it into the rocket. Our fuel is RP1, essentially a purified kerosene. It is safe, easily available, and has a lot of history. As a fun fact, the Saturn V first stage, flown from this very pad for moon missions, also used liquid oxygen and kerosene.
Falcon Heavy tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
And then we just heard the call out. We are preparing for that strong back retraction. Now, in addition to the two propellants I mentioned, we also use the chemical TTEB, or triethyl aluminum and triethyl borane, as an ignition source. The combustion of RP1 and LOX is what makes the rocket go up, and it's the TTEB that basically sets the match for that propellant mix.
Strong back lower has begun.
And we can see there on your screen shortly that we will begin to see that strong back begin to retract away from the fairing. In preparation for that retraction, the clamp arms around the second stage opened, and that allows the strong back to recline away from the vehicle. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is our first Falcon Heavy flight in 3 years, and a lot will happen in the first 4 minutes of flight. First, we will light the two side boosters, followed by the center core. Then, about 40 seconds after liftoff, we will decrease power on the two side boosters in preparation for max Q, after which Falcon Heavy will then throttle back.
NY LOX load is complete.
So there we heard the call out that one of these side boosters is now complete with its LOX load, fully loaded with all of its propellants. Then it looks like we can see that strong back retraction happening now.
PY LOX load is complete.
We are now fully loaded with LOX on the other side booster. So 2 minutes into flight, we will again reduce thrust on the two side boosters, this time to decrease forces on the rocket structure overall. The vehicle at that point in time will be much lighter, but the thrust remains constant. At 2.5 minutes into flight, we fully turn off the side boosters with the booster engine cutoff, or BECO. This pneumatic
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And there we heard the call out, stage 1 LOX load is complete. So at this point in time, both side boosters and the center core are now fully loaded with its liquid oxygen and RP1. Once clear of the side boosters, the center core will throttle up to full power and until the center core shuts down with main engine cutoff, or MECO, and then separate from the second stage around the 4-minute mark. From that point on, very similar to Falcon 9 mission, side boosters will be making their way back to Earth for recovery. The fairing will separate, and the second stage will take the USSF-44 payload out into space. Just as a quick reminder, at the request of our customer, we won't be showing views of the payload, so we'll be ending the webcast just after our side boosters make their way back to land at LZ1 and LZ2, and that will be a little after the T+8-minute mark into flight.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
So there we heard the call out, stage 2 LOX load is complete. So at this point in time, Falcon Heavy is now fully loaded with all of its propellants. As I've mentioned before in previous webcasts, launch is hard. Falcon Heavy is no exception. We're essentially counting down 3 rockets simultaneously. So our team is going to be conservative in case anything pops up in the last minutes of the countdown. In addition to the fog around the launch pad, we can see some of the white clouds there around the vehicle. Totally normal. That's just the liquid oxygen basically
ground gas closeouts.
Vaporizing as it comes into contact with the ambient air. Now that those closeouts are complete, as we just heard that call out, we should see more of that. Next, we'll hear the call out that Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon Heavy is in startup.
All right, at this point in time, Falcon Heavy's onboard flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. Great view of the base of Falcon Heavy there.
MD, LD, go for launch.
LD, this is the MD. The MD is go for launch.
And there we heard the final go for launch.
T-minus 30 seconds and counting.
Let's listen in to the final count as Falcon Heavy gets ready to go to space once again.
T-minus 15 seconds and counting. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, liftoff.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
MOD chamber pressure is nominal.
Nominal power and telemetry.
Pounds of thrust. Headed to space. We've throttled down in preparation for max Q, moment of peak mechanical stress on the rocket.
Falcon Heavy is supersonic.
There we just heard the call out that the vehicle is now traveling faster than the speed of sound. What a beautiful sight.
Max Q.
All right, there we just heard the call out. That is the moment of peak mechanical stress on the rocket. M1D engines throttling back up. A beautiful sight to see Falcon Heavy flying once again. Shortly we'll hear the call out for MVAC chill, indicating that the second stage is prepping the MVAC engine.
Vehicle is following a nominal trajectory.
We will flow a little bit of the super chilled liquid oxygen through the turbo pumps on that MVAC in preparation for the full flow of the super chilled propellant. Shots there of each side booster on the right-hand side of your screen. Next event will be booster engine cutoff, or BECO. That'll be followed by stage separation of side boosters, side booster boost back burn, center core main engine cutoff. We are about 10 seconds away from the booster separation.
Side core shutdown.
Booster separation confirmed.
And there you can see and heard it by the incredible excitement within the crowd behind me. Successful separation of the side boosters.
Boost sector startup.
There we can see 3 engines on each side booster have relit for their boost back burn. At this point in time, both side boosters are
All
returning.
vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
Good news there, both side boosters and the center core, everything looking good. Side boosters are returning to the coast of Florida, now under the power of 3 engines. That's a view there of the center core. Coming up, 3 events happening in rapid succession. We'll have the conclusion of the side booster boost back burn, followed by main engine cutoff, as well as stage separation of that center core. As There you heard the call out and saw on your screen we had side boost back burn
Center core empty.
conclusion, as well as the main engine cutoff and separation for that center core, and we heard call out of second engine start 1. At this point in time, with that call out,
Fairing separation confirmed.
we will wrap our coverage pertaining to the second stage, keeping our focus on the
All
side
vehicles
boosters,
continue to follow nominal trajectories.
which you see there. Unfortunately, looks like
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
the cameras on those side boosters are a little fogged over. We heard confirmation of successful fairing separation. While second stage continues on its journey, the fairing halves will fall back to Earth, where we will attempt to
Welcome, everybody, to the B Word. I'm Steve Lee, the lead of Square Crypto, and I'm here today to moderate a discussion about Bitcoin that will span from what makes it special to the its relationship with energy, the community ethos, and the future of Bitcoin. I'm joined by 3 special guests. The first is Kathy Wood, founder, CEO, and CIO of ARK Invest. Next is Elon Musk, techno king of Tesla and chief engineer of SpaceX. And finally, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Square and CEO of Twitter. So we have a lot to talk about today. So let's get to the talk and get right to it. I'm going to start off by asking each of you a question, which is what's shaped and influenced your views on Bitcoin? And let's start with Kathy.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Well, the first thing was our focus on disruptive innovation. So starting in 2011, Brett Winton, our director of research, who I know will be on the program later, he started talking about this thing called Bitcoin at the time. And it was a curiosity as we were doing our brainstorms in research. But as we learned more about this open source ecosystem, that might fulfill the role of the payment system that the internet neglected to build into the system, not expecting commerce. We thought, this might be something. And then I became even more interested when I realized that my economics would come into play as well here. And Art Laffer, my mentor from USC, and a monetary scholar, in 2014, I asked him if he would collaborate on a paper on Bitcoin. And he was a bit of a naysayer at first, but agreed to read the paper. He read the paper, tore it up, and from an economics point of view, really wanted to understand this. And he said, I think you got something here. This is a rules-based monetary system. I've been waiting for this for my entire career. So the combination of disruptive innovation generally, economics on top of that, and the huge misunderstanding out there as to what this is, that was intriguing and launched our research effort.
Thank you. Elon, what's influenced your views on Bitcoin?
Well, I've thought about money for quite a while, obviously since the PayPal days. And then the companies that preceded that, X.com, which I created, and Confinity, which Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, Luke Howry, and others created. When we combined the companies and made PayPal. So I've been thinking about money for a long time. And really, it's best to think of money as an information system, primarily an information system for labor allocation. For practical purposes, it exists in a series of heterogeneous databases, very different databases in bank mainframes around the world. It moves quite slowly in reality. It may seem to move fast sometimes, and it does with PayPal, which is real time. But the vast majority of the systems out there are batch processing. So the actual reconciliation may take 1 to 5 business days, sometimes longer. And you have the ACH system, which is ancient and still in operation, which allows transfers effectively like a check would be an ACH transfer, but it's not secure. and you've got the credit card systems, which are also not secure. It'd be like handing your username and password to a stranger in a restaurant if you buy a meal. So there's definitely an opportunity for something that is better from an information theory standpoint. So and there you can think of it like data on a network. I think is the way to view it. What has the most throughput? What has the least error? What drops the fewest packets? Fraud, for example, being a source of error. And government interference in currencies being a source of error. But it's fundamentally an information system. So I think it makes sense to support something that improves the quality of information with which we conduct the economy. And Bitcoin is a candidate for that. It does, I think, some things well, and it's obviously it's evolving, and there are additional things like Lightning being done on top of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin per se is mostly solving for scarcity, or rather solving for essentially having no throat to choke, decentralized. So there's no one who can be coerced in any way to empty their Bitcoin account. Well, I guess they could technically, but on an individual basis, but the system as a whole cannot. And it has an open ledger, which is also quite good. But transaction volume is low. Transaction cost is high, and usability for the average person is not yet very good. But it has a lot of potential. And I should say that, like, I'm not, and I apologize for taking a long time, but there certainly is a lot to say. In general, I'm a supporter of Bitcoin and the idea of cryptocurrency in general. But as I've said publicly, we do need to watch out for crypto taking, especially Bitcoin, using proof of work to maybe use energy that's maybe a bit too much and not necessarily good for the environment. So, but on balance, I support Bitcoin, and I'm not an investor. The only publicly traded stock I own is Tesla, and the only significant thing I own outside of Tesla is my SpaceX stock that could help create both companies. So, but apart from that, I do own Bitcoin, and Tesla owns Bitcoin, SpaceX owns Bitcoin, and then I do personally own a bit of Ethereum and Dogecoin, of course. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And we'll get into some of those issues in more depth as well. Jack, how about you? What shaped your views of Bitcoin?
The network and the community. It's deeply principled. It's weird as hell. It's always evolving, and it just reminded me of the internet when I was a kid. And I encountered alt cypherpunks when I was fairly young, and this was a topic of discussion for years. I didn't touch it until 2008 when we started Square. Elon and teams at X and PayPal inspired a lot of what we were trying to do, trying to bring in more to a physical world. But we encountered this crazy predatory system that was slow, that was obtuse, and I think one of the things that we tried to do, which X and PayPal also tried to do, is build an abstraction layer around this complication and around this predatory nature that the financial industry can tend to be, and make it work for people. But when I saw Bitcoin in 2009, you see a chance to replace the whole foundation. And everything that Elon was talking about in terms of ACH and the credit card networks were built with very different agendas in a very different time frame, and it's crazy that they still exist, and they have scaled, but they just are not relevant to today, and they're certainly not relevant to the future, especially when you consider the entire world and countries like Nigeria or Ghana or India, and its interconnection with countries like the United States and Canada and all over Europe. So what really drove my thinking and drives my passion around it is, like, if the internet gets a chance to get a native currency, what will that be? And to me, it's Bitcoin because of those principles, because of that creation story, because of its resilience, because of the number of tests it's been. But what inspires me the most is just the community driving it. It just reminds me of the early internet. It's the only reason that I have a career, because I learned so much from people like who are building Bitcoin today, and I continue to learn in that sense, and I'm so grateful for it.
So that's a good segue into the next question I'd like to ask you, Jack. Is you said before that Bitcoin changes everything. Can you speak more to that?
Well, I just think that a lot of what we experience in life, when you really get down to the foundation, a lot of our monetary policies, a lot of our monetary systems cause so much distraction and so much cost. And when you get to a system where you have the potential for people to truly own it, they can verify it themselves. You don't have to have trust going in. You don't have to trust it at all. You can verify it through source code or whatever your appetite is, and that any particular person can help drive the future of it. And at the same time, it's not controlled by any state. It's not controlled by any bank. It's not controlled by any corporation. And these three parties of people who participate in the network, people who mine, and also the developers, constantly debating the correct roadmap and the way forward, is a beautiful thing. And I don't know of many other consensus-based models that have existed at that scale for this long with this amount of success. And we're still fairly early. So when, I met a woman in Ethiopia 2 years ago, and she was trying to create the lift for Ethiopia. Elon, I think I reached out to you at that time as well, because she really wanted some Teslas. She still has to take paper fiat cash from her passengers and pay all of her drivers in the same way, because there's no monetary system that she can utilize. There's nothing digital. And Africa as a continent is hugely interconnected from a monetary standpoint, but also hugely taxed in that same way. So a lot of the potential that I see, the internet having a native currency helps her build her business in a much faster way. And also, if you consider something like Bitcoin existing before YouTube, before Twitter, before Facebook, a lot of the business models that we have today would not be the same. We would certainly not have the dependency we have upon the advertising business model if Bitcoin existed pre-Twitter. And I think the amount of business models that it enables, the amount of innovation it enables going forward, especially when you can consider the whole internet instead of going country by country by country by country, which you have to whenever you're doing with finance, it really just opens the aperture. And that is what I want to see in my lifetime is a currency that is